Welcome everybody to Viata's Tiny House Village. We're also going to be live on Blog Talk Radio in less than a minute. So let's get this party started with my favorite
Your show
intro.
will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
My favorite intro. Here you go. All right, we are live now in Blog Talk Radio. So let's get busy. Welcome, everybody. You can watch me tonight on Viata's Tiny House Village on YouTube Live. Blog Talk Radio, we're in the studio. You can call in 215-383-5863 or right here on Facebook Live, Soul Purpose Healing. So let's bring in Becca Shea. We drum in Becca Shea and invite all our ancestors to join us because we are in a serious spiritual battle in the United States, if not globally. And so we want to bring in our ancestors for assistance, help, guidance, wisdom. So we drum in at the beginning of the show Becca Shea, beautiful Christian artist who brings unity, promoting unity. So let's get your drums out and let's do this. Here we go. Yeah.
And has blood has run from people for all time.
Hey.
From every tribe and language, people, every nation.
Hey.
Where warriors are falling, there's a resurrection coming. It's your time to rise and shine.
Wake up, you sleeping giant.
Go love and justice, I'll be healed by the peace.
Hey.
Oh, Yahweh, bringing the power to unity. Where warriors are falling, there's a resurrection coming. I will try to come alive. Wake up, you sleeping giant. I feel it. I feel your heartbeat. I feel it. I feel your heartbeat. I feel it. I feel your heartbeat. I feel it. I feel it. Yeah, I feel it.
We welcome our ancestors. We welcome love. We welcome wisdom, compassion. We welcome the spirit of forgiveness. We welcome the spirit of truth. Woo! Hallelujah, hallelujah. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me on YouTube Live, Viada's Tiny House Village, on Facebook Live, Soul Purpose Healing, and my personal page. I'm also on my personal page on Facebook Live. And we're here in the Blog Talk Radio studio, ready to jam with truth, love, and compassion, wisdom, forgiveness. All the high vibrating energies are coming in tonight on this July 2nd. Yes, we are in the next 6 months of this year of 2023, number 7. And today is also a 7. So we are vibrating high tonight with truth and love and purpose, soul purpose healing. And tonight our subject is about Hollyweird, Hollyweird. Oh my goodness. This is why the topic for this show came to me. I got to turn this air conditioner off because it's too noisy. Okay. The topic for this show came to me tonight because I was invited to go to the movies. And I don't go to the movies very often for various reasons. But my son and his girlfriend Friday night invited me to go see Indiana Jones. Who doesn't enjoy a good Indiana Jones movie? At least in the past, maybe. But my son's girlfriend wanted to get there early or on time so she could see the previews. Yikes. My idea of getting there early is torture, because usually the previews are so violent, I don't even want to sit through that. But we got there early, we got there on time, just in time to see all the previews. So for 20 minutes, I had to endure or suffer through at least, I would say at least four previews of really violent movies. Every one of these previews for the movies that are coming out or whatever had guns and killing. So by the end of the previews, my nervous system was in just in a discomfort, I'll say. And then the movie started, Indiana Jones. Oh yeah, we loved Indiana Jones. But this movie was just like the previews. Lots of shooting and violence, and the energy was just very uncomfortable for me. So I said, when after the movie, I thought, wow, these people who create movies. In fact, I think it was Steven Spielberg, Lucasfilms, which is the person who made Star Wars. I thought, wow, these people don't realize the impact they're having on our communities. So I want to give us some solutions tonight, and most of all, how we can prevent some of the tragedies that we've heard about just in the last 2 weeks that are going on in our cities all over the country, if not the world. And Paris is burning. So yesterday, when I was doing the Female Solution blog talk show, I was hosting that for Naima Latif, our executive producer. Zana, who lives in the UK, wanted to talk about why Paris is rioting. People in Paris are rioting, and there's a lot of turmoil and conflict. Well, to me, this is just par for the course. We are in such an insane time where we are transitioning from third dimension reality, all physical, look what I see, look what I see with my eyes, versus fourth dimension, where we begin to accept our reality of invisible forces affecting our everyday world. So my general solution for all the chaos that's going on is consciousness. Consciousness, consciousness. So we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so really exploring what does consciousness really mean, because people throw that word out there and I don't think we fully understand what it means to be conscious. But I truly believe, from my experience, knowledge, wisdom, that that's the solution to a lot of the violence in Chicago, for instance, and for other areas. If we had more conscious people on this planet, then we would not see the conflicts that occur where, for instance, a 14-year-old has to shoot a man because he got upset with something his mother said. So I want to start off tonight with Ralph Smart. He's one of my favorite YouTubers. Ralph Smart gives us kind of an introduction to why these things are happening in our world. Why is there a conflict in Paris, for instance? Let's see. We're going to pull up the video too from his latest. We're going to pull up the latest video, which he called France. Things they don't want you to know. But to know exactly what Ralph Smart is actually a psychologist by profession. And he gives so much advice and wisdom on the current events. And so I saw this video and I said, oh, I got to share this. Even though he starts out talking, he explains actually what's going on in France, but he always gives a higher perspective on things. And that's where I want to start with the higher perspective. And what does Ralph Smart say we need to understand when we see these events? What is the bottom line to these events, like what is going on in Paris? So let's listen first of all. And it's a long video, but I'm not going to play the full video. I just want you to get the introduction that Ralph brings, the basic reason things are happening, and then what we need to be thinking about when we see all this chaos and shooting and violence. What does it actually mean for us as conscious individuals, as light workers, and all the things that this audience brings to the world? So let's
90 listen. Seconds. Peace, infinite waters, diving deep once again. Shout out to all of you wonderful deep divers. I hope you're taking care of yourself. For some reason. That was beautiful. Woo! Breathing in that good ass prana, baby. What are we doing? Raising the free.
It looks like I set my show for less than 120 minutes, which is going to be a real bummer. 90 seconds. How did that
60 happen? Seconds.
My show is scheduled to end. So I'm going to see what's going to happen if I can go over. 15 minutes. Somehow my show got scheduled for 15 minutes. So I'm going to go over, I'll probably go over to Female Solution, if that's still on. Let me bring up the Female Solution. I don't know. Sometimes this happens. For some reason, my show got scheduled for 15 minutes. So it's going to go off in just a little bit. I think I'm going to wait and see what happens. So if that happens, I'll go over hopefully to the Female Solution page and continue the show there. I don't know how this happened, but looks like that's what I did. 15 minutes, 10 seconds. And I'm going to see if I can continue the show, though. I think we can continue. Let's see. It's still going, maybe. If you can hear me, press one. If you can still hear me, press one, because evidently the show has ended, but I still have, it's still showing some people in the studio. But let's see what happens. I'm going to keep, okay, Mama AZ, I think she can hear me. Mama AZ, your mic is open. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I sure can.
Okay, I'm
Dr.
going to
P,
keep,
how are you?
I'm good. I'm going to keep going, even though it says my show is over. I don't know how long I have after this, but my show might end a little early because I didn't schedule it for the full time for some reason. So let me keep going. I'm going to play Ralph Smart. Thank you, Mama AZ. Ralph Smart. I'm going to play him and see how far we go with Ralph Smart.
Peace, Infinite Waters, diving deep once again. Shout out to all of you wonderful deep divers. I hope you're taking care of yourself. That was beautiful. Woo! Breathing in that good ass prana, baby. What are we doing? Raising the frequency, raising the vibration. Look, deep divers, I hope you're keeping your frequency high. Let's talk about France. So much is going on in France right now. You have a lot of people protesting, a lot of people very unhappy because the 17-year-old Niel was gunned down by a police officer, got a bullet lodged in his brain in a simple traffic stop. The police said he didn't do as they said. He kept on driving, so they just did that. And a lot of people in France is crazy there. You know, a lot of people are very upset. And also, there is a lot of division because some people are like, actually, what the police did were right. And some people are saying, no, it's not right. And then there is like a kind of race war going on there, all kind of things. I want everybody, first and foremost, to hit that like button if you support the real. Deep divers, hit that like button if you support the real. We got a whole lot to talk about, things they're not telling you. Now, I always tell you, anytime there's like a big story, we're going to use this to see the lesson to be learned. And even in this tragic, unfortunate situation, we can still remind ourselves that this is a lesson when we talk of becoming our greatest versions, to see what's actually happening. We can always learn from any situation or circumstance. And there's always a positive in every negative situation. So deep divers, are you ready to dive deep? The cat down the road is. So I just want to send some good energy to the family of Niel. That's his mother right there. This 17-year-old boy got tragically gunned down by a police officer in France, and it was over a routine traffic stop, and the police said he kept driving, so the police officer shot him. And it's been crazy in France because you see a lot of people are actually using this as an opportunity to go and loot stores, which I don't condone. That's terrible, right? A lot of people as well are saying, hey, those immigrants shouldn't be in our country, right? So a lot of people are turning it into a race thing. We're going to dive deep. Are you ready to dive deep, deep dive? Because there is so much we can uncover and unravel. Are you ready, deep divers? Because that's what we do here. I'm not here to give you the news. I'm here to break down the news. I watch the news to see what they're not saying. What? Slow motion this side. And we ain't even had breakfast yet, deep divers. Can I get a hello? First and foremost, let love guide you and not fear. Let love guide you and not fear. I want to remind you, deep divers, to keep focusing on yourself. There are so many things happening in the world. it's hard to keep up. But don't get distracted out here. Don't get distracted with what's happening in France. Focus on yourself and create peace within yourself, because the truth is, we must become the change we wish to see in the world. Once we are peaceful, the world out there becomes peaceful. The media can make you hate someone else you've never met. And in France, there are a lot of people who are like, yes, those immigrants should be kicked out of the country and France will be peaceful. I actually went to France, deep divers, when I was younger. I actually went to school there. French exchange. Born in London, went to France there, went to France, and it was very interesting. Very interesting. I'll tell you about that experience a bit later. But going back to this tragic situation, only 17, and they're saying, he shouldn't have been driving that car, and he got stopped by the police, and unfortunately lost his life in the process. No one deserves, especially a 17-year-old, to have their life taken away over a traffic stop. Now, some people say the police were just doing their job. I'm a criminologist, deep divers, and the police have been charged because it's obvious he shouldn't have done that. Nevertheless, there's a deeper significance in this whole event we have to uncover. So let me actually play you. First of all, let me show you something that Martin Luther King said, because this is really a solution to any of these events. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Thank you, Martin. Slow motion. Absolutely. So let me play you the clip of the passenger inside of the car with Nael, because he actually details what actually happened.
Cette vidéo pour rétablir la vérité, car il y a plein de choses fausses qui tournent sur les réseaux, sur la mort de mon copain Naël, et je vais vous raconter l'histoire de la Z. On s'est retrouvés mardi 27 juin à 8h10, on nous a prêté la Mercedes, on a décidé de faire un tour dans Nanterre, nous étions ni sous alcool, ni sous ballon, ni sous drogue. Au bout de quelques minutes, nous nous sommes retrouvés sur la voie de bus, sur la jolie curie. Nous étions en train de rouler quand j'ai aperçu les motards de la police qui se sont mis à nous suivre. Ils ont mis les gyros. On a fini par s'arrêter au niveau de la rue Pasteur François Rago. Le premier policier est venu à demander à Naël de baisser la fenêtre, ce qu'il a fait, Naël. Il a baissé la fenêtre. Et il lui a dit « coupe le moteur ou je te shoot ». Et il lui a mis un premier coup de crosse. Ensuite, le deuxième est arrivé, il lui a aussi mis un coup de crosse et s'est placé au niveau du pare-brise face à Naël. De là, le premier policier qui est au niveau de la fenêtre lui braque une arme sur la tempe et lui dit « bouge pas ou je te mets une balle dans la tête ». Le second policier lui dit « shoot-le ». Le premier policier lui remet un coup de crosse. La voiture, c'est une boîte auto. La voiture n'était pas sur parking. Au moment où il a reçu le troisième coup de crosse, son pied a lâché la pédale de frein et la voiture a avancé. Et le second policier qui était au niveau du pare-brise a tiré. Du coup, son pied, il a enfoncé l'accélérateur. Je l'ai vu agoniser, il tremblait. On a percuté une barrière. J'ai eu peur. Je suis sorti de la voiture. Je me suis enfui. Je pensais que même moi, il pouvait me tirer dessus. Du coup,
he's going to translate that in just a minute. So hold on. Ralph will translate what this person is saying. There was a witness to this event in the car with this young man. So he's speaking in French, right, but so Ralph is going to translate. Now,
taking consideration, deep divers, there are always three sides to every single story. My side, your side, and the actual truth, right? But that was his account, which is very fascinating. And a lot of people in France were also very, very, very angry that meanwhile, while that was happening, and there being so much rioting and protesting and looting in France, you had the President Macron, he was doing this.
Cette vidéo pour...
So he was at the Elton John concert, and a lot of people in France were furious about that. So deep divers, let me break this down and show you how we can also use this unfortunate situation to get out a positive and help us become our greatest versions. Now, first and foremost, like I said, everybody bleeds red. Everybody bleeds red. Don't get lulled into this whole thing that, hey, I don't like these other people, right? That's a trap. Because you've got to remind yourself, in the Matrix, they divide you through race, religion. All of these things are mechanisms in place to keep you divided. On the top, they all work together. That's first and foremost. Secondly, like Martin Luther King said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So, yes, it is terrible. Niall lost his life at 17. Unacceptable. At the same time, you don't drive out hate with hate. You don't start looting, burning down libraries in Marseille and all of these things, and unrest in Paris. That's not the answer as well, because it would just breed more people saying, yeah, you see these immigrants, because he was from Algeria, right? And if you don't know, Algeria was once upon a time a French colony. So you have a lot of Algerians in France and Tunisians in France as well. Tunisia was also a colony of France, right? So what can we learn from this whole situation? We've got to remind ourselves that it's unacceptable. And this has created a kind of tension in France, a kind of civil war, little civil war, right? So you've got people saying, hey, we want freedom, and this should never happen again. And then you have people who are in France saying, hey, we have to protect France, right? Well, see, for you to understand the present, you must also understand and overstand what happened in the past. So let me just show you this. Do you know what this is, deep divers? A lot of people don't know. That's why I always tell you, knowledge is power. This is the Berlin Conference. And why is the Berlin Conference important? What does the Berlin Conference have to do? What does the Berlin Conference have to do with what's happening in France and anywhere else in Europe or America? Well, the Berlin Conference was 1884, 1885. The Berlin Conference was a meeting of 14 nations to discuss territorial disputes in Africa. The meeting was held in Berlin, Germany, from November 1884 to February 1885, and included representatives from the United States and such European nations as Britain, France, and Germany. No Africans were invited to the conference. The Berlin Conference took place at a time when European powers were rushing to establish direct political control in Africa. This race to expand European colonial influence is often referred to as the Scramble for Africa. Europeans called the Berlin meeting because they felt rules were needed to prevent war over claims to African lands, right? So in other words, they wanted to conquer Africa, and that's what they did. This is a little map of African colonization after the Berlin Conference. So you can see Germany has some, British Empire has some, France has some, Spain has some. And this was actually a map of all the countries under French rule, colonial rule, right? So you actually have in the green everything that belonged to France that they invaded and took. So you have Algeria, Tunisia, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Senegal, Guinea, all of these countries, right? 72 countries, right? So a lot of the people that you're calling immigrants in France are actually there because you destroyed their land and invaded their country to begin with. That's number one. Number two is, yes, hate cannot drive out hate. You see, when something like this happens, a tragic situation, looting and doing these things, burning cars is not the way to go about it, because now you're giving them a reason to say, you see, but people are angry. You had also the footballer Mbappe. His mom is of European ancestry. His dad is of African ancestry, right? And he's one of the greatest footballers in the world right now, if not the greatest footballer in the world right now. And he plays for France, right? So he actually wrote about this, his disgust, and he's very upset. And, ultimately he wants, peace in that whole region in Paris, right? But he was the one that helped France win the World Cup, right? And he was even praised by Macron, right? So why I'm telling you this is because, you see, the whole world is becoming multicultural, whether you like it or not. People are mixing. And a lot of people are stuck in old ways. This person shouldn't be in my country. Well, like I told you, countries have invaded other countries. The Berlin Conference. European countries invaded the whole of Africa. That should not have happened. But it did. And you have a lot of people from Africa going to Europe because their land was destroyed and taken. So, like I say, you have to learn about history to understand, and understand why things are the way they are. Once again, what is the answer? Love is the answer. Islam
And I'm going to end.
actually means peace.
I'm going to end Ralph's message there because he brought the main focus message to us. What is the answer? What is the solution? Love. And what are the lessons that we need to learn today from all the chaos, the murder, the guns, the shooting, and unconscious Hollyweird? As I said, sitting in a movie theater on Friday night, I realized how many, and the movie theater, thank goodness, was half empty. And that was a Friday night. And that's kind of weird, but I'm glad I'm actually celebrating that it wasn't full. For that means maybe fewer people are sitting, being brainwashed and influenced by all the violence that just irritated my nervous system. And it was really funny because after about watching the movie for about half an hour, I was so irritated. I went to sleep. The Most High, the Creator, I look at it as the Creator put me to sleep in that movie to help protect me. Woo! And it was late anyway. It was a 10 o'clock movie, 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh, I don't want to see this, but I'm there with my son and his girlfriend. He's driving. I can't just leave. So I was actually put to sleep in that movie. And I wake up and the movie's still going on. I'm like, oh, I'm still in this nightmare. Indiana Jones is not what it used to be. He was an older man in this part. They tried to do an AI presentation of him in the past. It didn't work for me. The acting was horrible to me and just too much violence. So I want to give you an example of consciousness. How consciousness, Ralph Smart brought us the solution, love. Love, and as he said, in every situation, we want to know what is the lesson. What is the lesson? And let's see, Zelda is in the Facebook Live studio. She says, oh my God, Brother Smart wakes up the planet. Yeah. And that's why I love sharing that man, because he's not only a psychologist or psychiatrist by profession, but he's also very spiritual. And Zelda also says, very grateful. Universe is waking the planet up. Violent movies really causes body and mental trauma. Yes. That's why we have issues in our tissues. Yes. Thank you, Zelda. Absolutely. And especially for me as an empath, I feel too many things around me in my environment. I'm very sensitive. I have to move. I have to change positions. I have to do everything to keep my nervous system calm. And let me just make this announcement. I mistakenly scheduled my blog talk show for only 15 minutes. And so it's over. The show actually ended, but it's still running in the studio. I don't know how long it's going to go, but I'm just praying it'll go as long as possible. And then if by chance blog talk shuts down, I'll be on YouTube live, Viada's Tiny House Village, till the end of the show. I will continue to do this show on Facebook Live as well as YouTube, Viata's Tiny House Village, if by chance Blog Talk shuts down. And Naima probably has a full schedule. I'd probably schedule that one 120 minutes, but sometimes I do this. 15. It said 15 minutes. I don't know how I did it, but I did. So anyway, continuing consciousness. Consciousness. I labeled this title, the show, Unconscious Hollyweird is destroying our communities, promoting violence and fear. All of the previews I watched in the movie theater promoted fear. There was one like scary movie that they previewed. It was like, you'd be screaming and walk out of there terrorized. And then all of them had violence, people shooting each other. No respect for human life in these movies, none whatsoever. People dying all the time. The answer or the solution to conflicts in Hollywood is kill them with a gun. So I want to talk about the event that happened in Chicago. But first, when I say that consciousness is the solution, many people struggle with the word consciousness. So I got, of course, a few teachings. I'm going to go through a few teachings on consciousness so that we really have a good foundation of what we're talking about when we talk about consciousness versus unconscious. So I downloaded or uploaded a few perspectives on consciousness, including Eckhart Tolle, Sadhguru, and Deepak Chopra, and even a few other ones. So I want to start out with what is consciousness? And I hope after you hear a few of these definitions that we can move right into the solution and the lesson from recent tragic events that took place in Chicago. And we can come away with the solution to future events that might occur that develop arguing, anger, any of those things. So let me start out with a question or someone speaking about what is consciousness.
You are a conscious being. But what does that actually mean? Consciousness is something that's difficult to define, but it is universally understood and experienced. It's been described as the most familiar and yet most mysterious aspect of our lives. But where does it come from? And what is it exactly? This is Unveiled. And today we're answering the extraordinary question, what is consciousness? Do you need the big questions answered? Are you constantly curious? Then why not subscribe to Unveiled for more clips like this one and ring the bell for more thought-provoking content. Consciousness is such a strange phenomenon that no one really knows how to explain it. Despite debating for thousands of years, philosophers haven't been able to reach a consensus on its nature, and neither have scientists in the modern era. Some argue that it cannot be studied or that it's nothing more than an illusion. Even a definition is hard to agree on. But one that academics tend to use is that a conscious being is aware of its environment, itself, and its perception. Deciding which beings fulfill these criteria is another story. Testing for consciousness in other animals is challenging, as while it's relatively easy to test for environmental awareness, determining self-awareness is much harder. One way to do so might be to communicate with an animal directly, but even then, there's still room for doubt. Coco the gorilla, for example, was able to learn sign language, use personal pronouns, and discuss her emotions. However, there's debate over whether this indicated consciousness or whether Coco was simply following unconscious cues and prompts from her trainers. Throughout history, many have viewed consciousness as a special attribute that separates humans from other animals, a gift from the gods. It's been seen as something that we all have, but which can never be explained and doesn't have a physical basis. However, that perspective began to change in the 17th century as thinkers like René Descartes began to struggle with the relationship between the mind and the brain. In the 18th century, physicians and physiologists started to uncover the importance of the brain in how we think. One of the most famous cases during this time was that of Phineas Gage, A railroad worker whose accidental frontal lobotomy in 1848 dramatically changed his personality. Thanks to advances in neuroscience, we now understand that thoughts have a basis in neural networks and emotions in certain neurotransmitters. Is there a physical basis for consciousness too? This idea also raises questions about the evolution of consciousness and when it first emerged. While some point back millions of years to the first great apes, or hundreds of thousands to the first archaic humans, others look to a much later date. One particularly surprising view comes from psychologist Julian James, who argued that consciousness emerged between 1230 and 850 BC, based on his interpretations of Homer's Greek epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Consciousness is perhaps the biggest riddle in nature. Stripped to its core meaning, consciousness is what allows us to be aware both of our surroundings and of our own inner state. But thinking about consciousness has this habit of taking us round in circles. We all intuitively know what consciousness is. It's this. It's what you're experiencing here, right now. But once we try to pinpoint just what exactly it is, it leaves us grasping at thin air. And not just us. Philosophers and scientists struggle to define consciousness. Different schools and ideas compete with one another, but no one has come close to figuring it out. It's unsettling to realize that we don't understand what makes us aware of ourselves and the world. In this fuzzy area, consciousness and intelligence are also related, although they are not the same. We'll talk in greater depth about theories of consciousness and intelligence in other videos. Like much of what makes us human, our consciousness is likely to have evolved from less complex forms as a product of evolution by natural selection. It has probably emerged from an immense several hundred million year sequence of countless microsteps that together make up a sort of gradient of consciousness. What was the first step on this path from the non-conscious to the basic consciousness that ultimately led to the convoluted consciousness we humans enjoy today? Take a stone. The consensus is that a stone is not conscious, though not everyone agrees even on this. Some panpsychists claim that a lump of rock may have an inner life. However, there are no real grounds for any such assumption, since stones never show behavior. Their inner life can neither be proven nor disproven. A more common starting point is with living things. A living thing, or a self, is a part of the universe that sustains itself and makes more of its kind. To do so, it needs energy. And this is where an awareness of the world comes in handy. The original function of consciousness was probably to direct a mobile self that was short of energy to a fresh supply of food. On the smaller scales of life, you don't need to be aware to find food. Trichoplex adherens, one of the simplest of all animals, moves around haphazardly. It slows down in the presence of food and speeds up in its absence. This is highly effective and makes the tiny creature spend more time where there is food than where there is not. But it never moves in a particular direction towards a particular target, and there's no need for it to be conscious of its environment. The first major step towards consciousness was probably taken when mobile selves started to move themselves directionally, moving towards what was good for them, say food, and away from what was less good, say someone else who thought that they were food. Take Dugicia tigrina, a tiny worm known for its funny face. Sometimes the worm is hungry, and sometimes not. This means that when it moves, the worm self is not simply producing an automatic response to an external stimulus, but that its actions depend upon its inner physiological state, whether it's hungry or sated. When it's just eaten, the worm is less energetic, but when starved for a while, it will move itself in the direction of tasty things.
Now, these are just introductions. We're going to go to Sadhguru now and learn the difference between unconsciousness and consciousness.
What is in your awareness is conscious. What is not in your awareness is unconscious. We will come. Right now, you're awake. So, you are aware of the light, the air, and this and that around you and the people around you. Suppose you fall asleep. Suddenly, you become unaware of all these things, isn't it? Right now, you are aware who is sitting next to you for some moment. Now I am talking to you. You become unaware who is sitting next to you, isn't it? So what you're aware of, what you're unaware of is varying. The sphere and the area of your awareness is varying at different times, isn't it? You're not always aware to the same extent. Whether it's about the outside or inside, you're not always aware to the same extent. When we talk awareness, we are not talking about becoming more and more aware about the outside. That is only for survival. To the extent it is necessary for survival, we must be aware of the outside. See, if you take the animals, for example, your dog. First of all, why dog entered your life? Today maybe for other purposes, but initially why dog entered your life is he is much more aware than you about the outside, isn't it? If you fall asleep, he still keeps hearing and smelling and tasting and everything around him. That's why you keep the dog at home, isn't it? Today maybe for companionship because people have abandoned you. But otherwise, fundamentally, dog came into our lives because he's more aware of the outside than you are, isn't it? He can see things and smell things and hear things that you cannot. That's the reason why he's come into your life. But we are not talking about that kind of awareness. When we say awareness, we are talking about you being aware of yourself. So how much of you is in your awareness right now? If you look at it, you will see very small aspects of you are in your awareness. So we have to deepen this process. If awareness has to grow, in one way, if you look at it, what you call as myself is a certain level of awareness, isn't it? Yes? If your awareness disappears, you also disappear, isn't it so? Right now you're alive. How do you know? Simply because you're aware. Yes? So in one way, what you call as myself is a certain level of awareness. But that awareness is happening in a minimal way. We want to extend this to every aspect of who I am, so that who I am becomes a completely conscious process. How to do it? Awareness has become a small thing simply because it's lost in these two heaps. The heap of food that you gathered as body and the heap of impressions that you gathered as mind, especially the heap of impressions. Now if you separate it a little bit, suddenly awareness is in full flow. Because it's lost in this, it is like there is a light bulb. Now if you cover it with a lot of cloth, still the light is burning, but light doesn't help to see, doesn't it? Now one thing is to crank up the voltage so that light becomes more intense, but the important thing is to remove the cloth that's covering it, isn't it? So we will do both. One thing is to clear it up. Another thing is to crank up the voltage. If these two things are done together, properly, sensibly, then you will see more of yourself than ever before.
For more on Sadhguru, visit www.ishafoundation.org.
So we have been hearing about consciousness, and we're going to do more about prevention of tragic events because of now our awareness of consciousness, what it means. Awareness of what? The key thing I want to bring out now with this next audio is how do we raise consciousness so that we can prevent the violence and the killings and the deaths that have occurred in recently in cities. So one more audio I want to play before we talk about the event in Chicago that happened recently and how it could have been prevented, where a 14-year-old kills another man because he hit his mother. So this one is about raising consciousness. It's by a man, Don DePani. I never heard of him before, but when I listened to this, I thought this is powerful. So how do we raise consciousness so that we can prevent more killings, more deaths that Hollyweird keeps promoting?
Your greatest contribution to humanity is your own self-realization. As you uplift yourself, you uplift everyone else around you. Nobody spends time with themselves. We depend completely on machines. We plug ourselves with a whole bunch of things to measure data, to see this, to see that. Really get rid of all that stuff and get to know your body, get to know your mind. If you don't spend any time doing that, how would you know what you want in life? We all want to be happy. Happiness should never be pursued, but rather pursue a lifestyle where the byproduct of that lifestyle results in happiness. I do that by being concentrated. Concentration is at the very core of all human endeavors and success, so that you can truly enjoy every experience in your life and be present. The young kids these days can only concentrate for a length of 7 seconds. How do you expect to solve problems in the world if your attention span is only 7 seconds? Why are we ignoring the environment? Because people are selfish. We have the most beautiful planet in the known galaxy, and yet we don't take care of it. Are we dumb or are we dumb? The way to start is to uplift human consciousness. And when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, how can I make a difference in the world today? We all need to help each other because we can't get through it alone.
So that person put forth the idea that raising our consciousness means changing our lifestyle, looking at ourself, reflecting on the reality of what do we want in our life. And part of that is changing our lifestyle or being more aware of the lifestyle we desire. We want to be happy. We want to have peace. We want to have joy in our lives. So if we wake up with the thought that I want to bring forth awareness in myself for about myself and other people, that we're not totally consumed by what makes me happy, but we also are looking outward to how can I make a difference in this community that I'm in my lifestyle, and so forth. So if anyone has any comments or questions about consciousness, press 1 in the studio. We're still live in the Blog Talk Radio studio, and we're on YouTube, Viada's Tiny House Village, and we're also in Facebook Live. So we want to talk about the event that happened in Chicago recently, where a 14-year-old took a gun and shot a man more than once because he was beating up his mother. And I want to give you a scenario where if both people were conscious, what might have happened? Instead of both people, all of them, let's say all 3 of them were conscious, including the witnesses and all that. Let's just say all of them were unconscious. Why? Because they failed to exercise love in this situation. Love for each other, love for the environment, love for the situation in general, that a conflict develops and we don't know how or why the conflict developed. Just let's assume, I'm going to assume something, since it was a place of eating, that maybe the person was ordering their food and They were taking a long time deciding on what they wanted. Let's just say the woman in this situation was taking a long, and we don't know. This is just an assumption I'm making that will bring forth the idea of preventing any drama and certainly death in this situation. So a woman stands there, she's ordering her food, and she's taking a long time. Let's just say she can't decide how to order food, and there's a line, so people are getting impatient, which happens often, and maybe there's only one person and behind the glass who's accepting the order. She's getting her food, or she's ordering her food, and another person is very impatient. A man is very impatient, and he starts yelling at her, "Why don't you just get your food? Get your food!" And the woman gets irritated, but she says to him, "I am so sorry, sir. I'm going to let you get your food first." This is totally unheard of, right? But, or she says something like, "I apologize to you, sir. I know I'm taking a long time, but please be patient with me." And by this statement, the man decides to say, "I'm sorry, you're right. I'll just wait. I'll be patient." That's consciousness, consideration for each other, for one another, that we're all not going to be moving at the same rate. We're all not going to be able to quickly make up our minds and get what we want. And so in this case, where the consciousness of these two individuals was working together to not create more conflict or more disagreement or anger, not to trigger more anger in an impatient individual, but actually to soothe whatever impatience. That's consciousness, where you have people communicating, interacting together, and they create an environment of peace. They create an environment of peace. Soul Purpose Healing Blog Talk channel. Let me see. So this is the scenario. Yes, I am. I'm still on Soul Purpose Healing. As far as I can tell, my episode has not ended on Soul Purpose Healing Blog Talk. Thank goodness. And we're still on Female Solution. So with the idea of consciousness ruling in a potential conflict at a food establishment or any place where one person is a little impatient, one person's not moving at the rate that the other person thinks they should be moving, then consciousness kicks in when both parties are more considerate of the other person than they are of themselves. Then that way, it doesn't end with someone pulling out a gun, which is all about fear. Hollyweird is all into promoting fear and bringing out the gun. And no, there's actually, when you look at most of the movies that Hollywood puts out, there's no regard for human life. There's no respect for human life. A gun ends of conflict easy. And in fact, that is generally the way all conflicts end in Hollywood, is a gun. I don't even see movies, these romance movies, that much in Hollywood. The one movie that I enjoyed so much, Chevalier, was historical. And even with that, there was very little violence. Now, the French Revolution took place back in Chevalier's period of time, but then there was music there that was highlighted as well. So in this situation where a man brings out a gun instead of conversation taking place, this is the difference between consciousness and unconsciousness, is using or acting on fear versus love, peace, understanding, understanding. As Sadhguru said, every situation that we observe, and this was like a movie to me, watching this 14-year-old react to a situation was like watching a movie where a man is mentally ill. When you have a situation, when we can watch a movie like that, we can learn so many lessons. There's a huge lesson watching a movie where a man is start demonstrating how angry he is by wailing his hands around and yelling at someone and threatening to hurt them. That to me is mental illness. And I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but as an observant, conscious individual and an empath, I'm always looking at the energy around a person and their emotions that they display when they're triggered. You can tell when a person's been triggered because their voice usually rises, they get angry, they start yelling at someone. Once you have that consciousness rise up in you, then it's your decision to stop, observe, and not say another word if you don't know how to diffuse the anger or the hate or whatever is being revealed to you as low frequency, low vibration. We are in a society now, we're in a time of our lives where many people have been injected with drugs, who are taking drugs. Why? For comfort. They're not happy with their lives. They're afraid of the environment they're in. They're afraid of the people around them. They're afraid that the news, in fact, the mainstream media is promoting on a daily basis how to be afraid. Be afraid. Be afraid. That seems to be the message these days with mainstream media. Be afraid. And by all means, don't love your neighbor as yourself, which the scriptures tell us, but otherwise get a gun, be ready to defend yourself, and don't even think about being patient with someone. These are the virtues of consciousness. And with unconscious Hollyweird, the communities are being destroyed if people are being programmed by these movies and television shows that are promoting the violence and the fear. So we're at the top of the hour. I'm wondering, Naima Latif, if you want to play any commercials, press 1 and I'll open your mic. Otherwise, I do have a commercial here. Let's see. I'm going to play one commercial. I'm not sure if Naima's back from her event. So let me play a commercial and we'll be right back after this message.
The Female Solution Global Radio TV Show invites you to an invigorating conversation with our team of hosts Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. Start your week with Monday Morning Mindfulness with Zelda Speaks. Tuesdays, Self-Care with Jody Susan. Wednesdays, Repairing Broken Families with Naima Latif and co-host Kareem Hamid. Thursdays, Soulful Solutions with Dr. Debbie Green. And Fridays, Health and Wellbeing with Beata. Saturdays, tune in 12 noon to 2 p.m. Central Time. First Saturday, Success Strategies with John. Second Saturday, Wendy Williams Esquire on relationships. Third Saturday, Move Around with Deborah. And fourth Saturday, Wisdom with Mama D. Join us Sundays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Time for Soul Purpose Healing with Beata. Call in and comment 515-605-9325. Press 1 to speak to the host and be a part of the solution.
And we're back. I want to keep going because I don't know how long I have in the Blog Talk studio of Soul Purpose Healing. And I want to get all this information out to you so that we can think prevention. After the event the show that I watched in Chicago, where a man was obvious to me, this man was obviously had mental problems, mental illness, you could say, or mental imbalance, you could say. And it was interesting yesterday when we had a guest and I brought this subject up. She said, oh, no, he didn't have any mental illness. And to me, it was just pretty obvious he did when a man is behaving the way he was behaving. Now, it could have been a drug influence. It could have been other influence. But when a man is wailing his arms around and anxious and angry and yelling at a woman, threatening to punch her, that to me is mental illness, mental imbalance. So we in the future, to prevent the further escalation to death and to violence and death, is to want to be consciously aware when someone demonstrates who they are. There's a saying that says, when someone shows you who they are, I believe it was Maya Angelou, believe them. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. If you're not conscious and you're not paying attention and you're only absorbed in yourself and your narcissistic focus on me, then you're going to miss the other person's energy that they're giving you and displaying to you who they are. They're not balanced. They're not at peace with themselves, and especially when they threatening to punch you, you better either have your gloves on and know how to defend yourself, not to have a gun necessarily, unless they're pulling a gun, then you could be the wild west. But in a preventive mode, we can prepare ourselves for conflict like this when someone is angry and hating and threatening to hurt you by, number one, observing without judgment and being still and quiet and moving away from the situation, maybe. These are some of the things that we can do to prevent the death of another individual, which Hollyweird promotes. This is we're really focusing on how we can prevent what Hollyweird is promoting: violence and fear. Can we save a life instead of taking a life? Well, here is another Eckhart Tolle is one of my favorite authors and speakers. And I have a teaching from Eckhart Tolle that I think is important on increasing consciousness. That's what this is all about. Preventing the event that happened in Chicago and that's happening all over the world, even in Paris. It's a global problem. It's a global problem. People are killing, shooting each other over conflicts that they are not able to control in their own environment. Consciousness is the solution, bringing the love of other humans into the environment that you're in, and that is all part of consciousness. So here is Eckhart Tolle giving us another important teaching on increasing consciousness.
What you sense in yourself as consciousness, the presence, emanates from the source of all life, which we can call God. So you are an emanation of God. Go back to the source. Conscious connection with source. So the consciousness that pervades this universe, that becomes focalized through this particular form. This consciousness that you can know in yourself consciously as a presence, and you are that presence. You don't have it. You don't have consciousness. You are consciousness. And even to say I am conscious is not quite correct. I am consciousness is more correct. So you are consciousness. Now, if the brain just is a transformer of consciousness, a receiver of consciousness, a channel of consciousness, where does this consciousness come from? Where does it emanate from? And the consciousness does not exist in this dimension. That's important, very important to realize. This dimension is the physical dimension. The physical dimension is where your physical body is and the physical objects of the senses. Then underneath the physical begins already that which is not part of the physical dimension, and it already begins with your thoughts. Even your thoughts are not part of this physical dimension anymore. They live in another, they exist in another dimension. You're going below the surface of, this is the surface world of physical things. you end your physical body. You go by being aware of your thoughts already not part of the physical dimension. They already exist in a deeper dimension. How do we know that? Because you cannot find the thought in the physical realm. A surgeon could open your brain looking for your thoughts. He would not be able to find a single thought because we don't know. Nobody knows what a thought is and where thought lives. Where does it live in you? Does every atom represent a thought? Do some molecules represent the memory of what happened to you on that day when you were 10 years old, and millions of other memories? Where do they live? All languages. I know, apart from English, I know 2 other languages. Well, they're getting a little rusty, but somewhere, those 2 languages that I know, they live somewhere, but where? Where do they live? At the moment, I'm not conscious of them. If something I say something in German or Spanish, suddenly something would come. I could say it, but where does this whole thing live? Thought is, and then it's come emotion again. Emotion, you cannot find. Emotion has certain correlates with certain physical processes, just as thought does. You can imagine something and then the body reacts to it. You imagine you're drinking lemon juice right now. Immediately, saliva will start accumulating in your mouth because your body thinks it's real. And if you get angry, your stomach lining, the inside, will become red, and many other things will happen in your body as you become angry. So, but the anger itself does not exist in the physical realm. It affects the physical, but it's in itself. And then you go further down and into the unseen. Also, in other words, consciousness is not of this dimension. Consciousness represents another dimension, the transcendent dimension. So the consciousness that you are emanates from another dimension and comes then into this, and an awakening happens. My suggestion to you is to consider the possibility, this is my intuitive realization. I don't want to convince you that it is correct, but it is my intuitive realization. The consciousness emanates from the source of all life, which of course does not exist here. It is, but it doesn't exist. Consciousness is the emanation of God, in the same way that light is the emanation of the sun. Consciousness is the emanation of God into this dimension. And it seems that gradually the light of consciousness increases in this dimension, gradually. You can see it in yourself, how gradually you grow in consciousness. You seem to grow in consciousness. And you are only a microcosm of the macrocosm. Whatever happens in you can tell you a lot about the universe. If you could understand yourself, you understand the universe. So consciousness comes into this dimension more and more. Consciousness itself is timeless. And then it enters this dimension where there is time, and there you experience it as an intensification of consciousness. You become more conscious. A human can become more conscious
the entire planet gradually is becoming more conscious. If you go back millions and millions and millions of years, the life on the planet was less conscious than it is now. Even animal life and plant life was less developed, less differentiated, less complex. Gradually, the world is being created still. The creation of the world is still happening. The entire process, we have no idea why this is happening, what the purpose of it is. You cannot understand it conceptually. It's just a vast